Could help with the hands up, Sam, just in case I miss anybody.
Yeah, no problem.
Hello, Chair.
Okay, right. Thank you, and good morning. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for People on this very hot summer's day, and we're hybrid only today. So, so there we are. Okay, so today's broadcast is being screened for public recording and can be used in any training training thingies. It's a really professional word. And I guess just to remind members that the code of conduct does apply at all times, as we know. And raise your hand if you want to speak. I know some are having problems with their cameras and the ability to communicate with us, and I've asked them to jump in if they got anything, and we'll sort of put them back and say, hang on a banger. I know that John likes that word, and that means hang on a moment for those who are unfamiliar with that saying. So we're going to go forward now, jump straight into it, and that paper, this paper, and apologies, please. Any apologies, Sam, or anybody that we've received? You're on mute, Sam.
You're on mute, Sam.
Off a good start. We've got a couple of apologies from Councillor Baker Westhead, Councillor Watkins and Councillor Harvey, and also from the Cabinet Member for Education, Councillor Davis and Bruce Cornwall.
Thank you, Sam. Any other apologies? I don't believe that is. Declarations of interest? None. Meetings of the previous meeting on pages 3 to 4. Can we have a mover? Thank you, John, and a seconder. Thank you. And we go into item 4, not in education, employment and training, the NEETs report, and off the presentation. And I believe that's yourself, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chair. I'm just waiting for Rebecca Sims to be invited into the meeting.
Okay, no problem. We shall wait. Okay.
There we are. I think she's joined, Sarah.
Thank you ever so much.
Okay, good morning, Rebecca. I can't see you, but you are there somewhere in the ether, I guess.
Chair, would
So-
you mind if I did a brief introduction? Oh, Becky's having problems joining. Sorry, Sam.
Okay.
While Becky's joining, Chair, would you mind if I just did a brief introduction to the paper and gave Scrutiny Committee some headlines?
Yes, by all means.
Thank you. Chair, you will remember that this was a specific paper that was requested by Scrutiny Committee, and it is to look at the NEET outcomes for Newport Local Authority. And of course, that means that we're looking at the outcomes of those young people that are not in employment, education and training. Now, each local authority in Wales has 3 key performance indicators in this area that are reported both publicly and to Welsh Government. And those key performance indicators focus on Year 11 NEETs. And that's quite a special KPI, considering that Year 11 are in statutory education. And so that cohort size is 2,000. And generally those young people are within schools. Okay. For Year 12, the schools are not necessarily directly involved with all young people. Our cohort in schools is 900 in Year 12, and in Year 13 is 700. And whilst we can secure destinations for Year 11 pupils, it becomes more and more, there's more opportunities and risks associated with learners at a later stage. Now, last year, it was particularly noticeable that there was a decline in Year 11 NEET outcomes, and that was unusual for Newport City Council because over time, contextually, the outcomes have been very strong. And so you would have seen Newport City Council Year 11 NEETs in at least the top 2 quartiles in Wales, if not the top quartile. Really strong outcomes. But last year, there was a significant dip, and we went down to 20th place out of 22 local authorities. So bearing that in mind, we forensically looked at what was causing this, and we recognised that lots of cross-service working was necessary and lots of multi-agency working with various partners, for instance, Coleg Gwent, Newport Academy for training providers, etc. And so I am really pleased to be able to report today that this year the figures are significantly different and they've improved. And we've gone right back up to 5th place from 20th position. And we hope now to secure our trajectory of that strong outcome by reflecting on some of the good working practices that we've re-established this year. So I hope that that will give Scrutiny Committee some confidence, but Becky will be able to answer all associated questions around the paper.
Thank you. And that was, just to clarify, Sarah, that was, you were speaking about Year 12 then, yeah?
I was speaking about Year 11 specifically.
Year 11,
yeah,
sorry.
That's right, yes.
Thank you, Sarah, for that. Okay. Becky, do you have anything to add to what the Chief Education Officer said?
My apologies that I was a minute late joining, Chair. I had some connection difficulties, so apologies also to Sarah, but I'm very happy to take any questions that members may have.
Okay, so we'll open it to the floor then. Anybody got, how we're going to do this? Because it's a short report, it's a very complex report. There's a lot of information in there. We're going to take it page by page, but not necessarily, just so we have some direction, but people will be jumping in and out and making their observations, not necessarily on the right page line. So,
Chair, can I come in with a general context question, just as an understanding of things happening on a UK level? Just in relation to the new youth hubs, is there any news on how that will adapt from what we see today and any changes moving forward? I know it might be new, but it would be ideal just to understand what changes or understandings, what we may see moving forward. Thank you.
Are you happy for me to answer that question,
yes.
Chair? So you may be aware from the report that it's actually Newport Youth and Play Service that received the youth support grant funding from Welsh Government, and a portion of that grant's delegated to education for us to support that partnership delivery of the youth engagement and progression framework. So similarly, Councillor Marshall, the youth hub funding is coming directly to the Preventions and Inclusion Service, and we are engaged in planning meetings with Newport Youth and Play Service for what that provision will look like in Newport. And there are meetings taking place at the early stages of planning, but it's likely that the information station, which currently is the location for Newport Youth and Play Station, will be similarly the location for Newport's Youth Hub. And my understanding is that funding at this stage is looking at additional staffing capacity to provide some additional youth work and hopefully careers guidance for young people at risk of disengagement.
That's great, thank you. And it just helps understand where we are moving forward on top to complement this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, so we go from page 9, page 10. Any questions or observations on page 10? I wonder, not necessarily page 10, but we heard about the great progress made on year 11, and even destination progress on year 12. There's progress there. But when it comes to the performance of year 13, that remains closely aligned with the national average due to, I guess it's due to complex issues and destination choices. I wonder if you could speak about the issues facing post-16 educations for these students.
Absolutely, Chair. So you're absolutely right that in year 13, the most recently published data performance shows that we are, whilst we're broadly aligned to the Wales average of young people in this year group becoming NEET was 3.6%, and in Newport it was 3.8%, which places us 13th in Wales. And as the Chief Education Officer noted, we aspire to be in the top or second quarter. So that will be a focus for the work of our partnerships moving forwards. Within year 13, of course, learners have a broad range of options open to them in terms of their next steps and destinations. And we do see a number of young people carefully considering whether higher education is the right option for them, for example. And one of the factors in their decision making would be around the costs of accessing a higher education placement and potentially the amount of debt that learners may take away with them after they've completed a university placement. So we're working to support learners to think about their broadest options at year 13. So we're currently working with Newport secondary schools, delivering sixth form assemblies in partnership with business in the community partners to ensure that year 13s are very well informed about all of their options. So another example would be a workplace apprenticeship, which could lead to a degree qualification, but maybe partly or fully funded by Welsh Government or the employer. And we know some of our year 13s may also explore further education options or indeed employment. So this will be a real focus for not only education, but preventions and inclusion, and indeed our careers advisors, partners in Careers Wales moving forwards.
When will we see evidence that we are moving forward and not just standing still? How can we gauge that?
So each year the destination data is published in the following October. So you'll notice, Chair, that the 2024 to 2025 academic year cohort, their census in terms of their destination at a snapshot in time is taken on the 31st of October 2025 by Careers Wales. So the pupils currently leaving school now this summer in year 13, their census data will be taken on the 31st of October 2026. But the early identification toolkit, which is referred to in the report, is our key mechanism for tracking young people, and that's every single young person in year 11, year 12 and 13 in every school in Newport. We track their progress on a half-termly basis. So every half-term, school-based staff, careers advisors and our education progression coordinator alongside youth workers meet together to complete what we call a RAG status, so a red, amber, green, where we use an embedded formula within the toolkit alongside professional judgment and knowledge of those young people to identify those that are either securely headed towards an identified destination that's the correct aspiration for them, and in addition those that may need some additional support. So we will be tracking those young people every half term, and the Youth Support Services Board is the governance structure which sits above all of those partners, and we report the progress towards destinations on a monthly basis to the Youth Support Services Board.
Thank you for that. And the comparative best practices, how does Newport compare to other areas in Wales, and is best practice from other authorities? So obviously there must be best practice from other authorities. Are we applying them, and how can we apply them to help us here in Newport?
Absolutely. So you'll note, Chair, that at the appendix for this report, I've provided the position of Newport compared with all of the other local authorities across Wales. There's an annual Welsh Government national meeting for all of the local authority leads that work within this arena. That took place during the autumn term of this year, and that's an opportunity for that networking and collaboration across local authorities. Our engagement and progression coordinator meets more frequently with his counterparts across Wales, and there's also a regional forum for us to work in partnership with local authorities closest to us geographically. There are often ESTIN thematic reviews, so those reports will highlight local authorities where there is strong practice for others to consider. Newport was featured in the most recent of those, as mentioned in this report. One of the innovative pieces of work that Newport's undertaking this year is to use the early identification toolkit model, but in an online space, so that it's a seamless and very timely model where all staff have access to that live toolkit and are updating their knowledge of each individual pupil on a very frequent basis. And that's something that other local authorities are interested in duplicating, if you like. So I recently had a meeting with Monmouthshire, for example, to explain how we've implemented that, as it's something that they would be seeking to model in their local authority.
So sustainable progress, what factors are being attributed to employment, education and training figures? And what steps are we actually taking to ensure these continue improving and have sustainability as well?
Absolutely. There are two examples I could provide you with there, Chair. So firstly, the University of South Wales is working closely with Newport City Council to develop a Newport Promise, which is going to be similar but bespoke to Newport, but along the lines of a model which you may be familiar with, which is the Cardiff Commitment. So that's an opportunity to bring together training providers, employers, statutory education services, higher education services and businesses in the city to make sure that we are enabling our young people to be well skilled to enter the workforce and meet the demands and the job placements that are available in Newport today. So that's a piece of work that's ongoing this year and has been based particularly around pupil voice. So it's very important as a council that we listen to the students and young people that are experiencing this transition to their destination after education and understand what matters to them and what the barriers are for them. In addition, we've made representations to Welsh Government around our particular challenges in Newport. So, for example, since August 2025, the size of our Year 11 cohort has increased by 13%. So you'll know that Newport is a very fast growing city. And this has happened at the same time that national funding to the two main contract holders for training providers in our region has been reducing. So we're trying to meet increasing demand with resources which are being more stretched over time. Training providers will be those partners that offer a post-compulsory education destination for young people who may be most at risk of becoming NEET. So those will be our students who have fewer qualifications in a narrower range of subjects and maybe seeking something more vocational or entry level. So the sufficiency of training provider placements is an absolute priority for us, and we work closely with our partners in Newport Youth Academy, which is a training provider, but it's run or hosted and delivered by Newport City Council, as well as our other training providers across the region.
And finally, from me, for that, I give way to everyone else then, I guess, is how effective, how confident are you as officers that the early intervention toolkit is being applied consistently and I guess accurately across schools?
Thank you, Chair. I'm confident that its consistency and accuracy of use this year is higher than ever before. So I personally attend regular meetings with every destinations lead in school. So each school in Newport has identified a member of their senior leadership team who is responsible for destinations and progress of learners towards those destinations. And I meet with those school-based staff every half term. We look at the EIT in detail. We consider the wellbeing support and mentoring support that individual learners might benefit from, and then that's delivered operationally through our engagement and progression coordinator. And he will undertake a wide range of activities. So examples would include visiting the homes of pupils where parents and families may have some barriers to engaging with support from school. He'll make a home visit and provide that support. He'll accompany young people to open days at colleges or training providers to help them make those initial introductions. And then strategically, he'll liaise with Coleg Gwent and our training provider partners to look at waiting lists or spaces available on courses and apprenticeships to make sure young people are matched to the right destination.
Thank you very much indeed. On those trails, does anybody else have anything to question or to add?
Yeah, I think we've got a couple of hands up.
I can't see it. Okay.
In the chat, if that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. In no particular order, we go with Councillor Davis first, and then Councillor Cleverly, and then Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair.
I've also got my hand up on the chat group. Thank you, Chair.
I can't see the chat group.
Chair, just to let you know, myself and Councillor Jenkins, we've had our hands up for quite a long time in the chat group.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not monitoring the chat group.
Chair, would it be helpful if I read out the order of the hands?
Is everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
I think that would be. Can you monitor the chat group for me? Because I'm not.
Yeah, of course. So at the minute, I've got Councillor Reynolds, then Councillor Jenkins, then Councillor Cleverly, then Councillor Watkins that have put their hands up specifically.
Councillor Reynolds first. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, Chair. The good news for you is your very thorough question has actually covered most of my points, so I'll be really quick with this.
Sorry, John.
I mean, the first thing I was going to ask was about the early identification toolkit and its application, but you've already covered that. So my next question then is to do with the data and the figures that are mentioned in the report. Newport, does stand up well in comparison to other Welsh areas, which is great news. I'm just wondering, do we have any similar comparisons with other UK regions outside Wales, maybe even with European equivalents? My next question then was to do with best practice, but again, you probably covered this, I think. Not so much about the best practice that we gain from others, but us actually sharing our good practice with others as well. But I think Becky's already mentioned about the fact that there's various forums and so on that take place, and it sounds like that does that sharing of information happens quite well. But if there's any further comment on that, that'd be great. But yeah, my main question, I suppose, really is about our figures outside just the Welsh comparisons. Do we have any data for that?
At present, we don't have data outside of Wales. So as I've mentioned, Careers Wales have the task of collating the census data and submitting that to Welsh Government, and then a limited range of that data is in the public domain on the Careers Wales website. We work closely in partnership with Careers Wales through an SLA so that we can have additional layers of data for our pupils in Newport and really understand in detail the types of destinations that they're securing. So as I've mentioned, we can try and work to make sure there's sufficient places for those that are in demand. In terms of best practice, so I think I've already mentioned the move to have the EIT being online so that it's in a live space through the hub network, so that partners across the council and outside of the council and in schools can access each individual pupil's information, on a daily basis if required.
Right, okay, thanks. I mean, do you think there's any prospect of being able to find data or to make comparisons further afield than just within our own borders?
Councillor Reynolds, the reason why we focused on our data here is we're trying to work out and do the comparisons of what's in our control with our multi-agency groups. So for instance, if we if we stay largely focused on Coleg Gwent as an optional provider for post-16, and we get to understand what their thresholds are to allow pupils into college for certain courses, and question collaboratively about the shortfall in pupils that might not be able to attain certain grades to get into that college, for instance.
Yeah.
We're trying to overcome local barriers and understand the local context of what we're working with. So we've prioritised that. We can certainly look at external comparisons. It's trying to weigh up, with limited resources, do you stay focused on acquiring really detailed forensic information which you can possibly have an influence over and make a difference to 10 learners, which significantly affect the outcomes? Or do you start to look at another local authority where it's difficult to understand funding mechanisms, the way that they're set up in England? They're almost abstract to us. They're not, we don't understand the finer detail of it. So it's difficult to be able to understand and relate to some of what we might be considered best practice. And also the reportable KPIs would be different in the way that they're calculated. So it is complex, but I do appreciate your idea of being able to look further afield, and that we should always consider that. But that's the reason, I suppose, we've been so focused on the forensic nature of working locally.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, thanks, Sarah. You've also touched on the funding. I was going to bring that in a bit later on as well, the funding implications of some of the work you do. I'll save that for later on, but yeah, thanks very much. Thank you, Chair. That's all for me for now.
Thank you. And next on our hit list of people.
Councillor Jenkins, Chair.
Councillor Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Apologies as my laptop is cutting in and out within the meeting.
That's okay.
I know the Chair asked a lot of the questions, but so I'm not sure if this has been asked, but how are young people tracked after leaving school to prevent unknown destinations? And are there any particular groups of young people not being identified early enough and possibly slipping through the net?
Thank you, Councillor Jenkins. So I'm just trying to make sure I remember both parts of your question. So in terms of the continued tracking of young people after they've left school, once the census is completed by Careers Wales, then the manager of the service for Careers Wales in Newport will work with his team, but in connection with education officers, to place young people in one of 5 tiers. So there's a 5-tier approach to careers advice and support through Careers Wales. And young people that are in tiers 1 and 2, which is those young people who may be NEET or very much at risk of becoming NEET, they will be allocated a careers advisor that will take them from the age of 16 through to 24. So there is continued monitoring of their engagement, but it's very much led by Careers Wales after that point in time.
Okay.
And that will also be in connection with the employability support team within the council. So that again sits outside of the education services remit. And then I believe the second part of your question, Councillor Jenkins, related to, are there groups of learners who would benefit from specific detail in terms of tracking? Is that right?
No, was there any particular groups of young people being identified? Are they being identified early enough? And what happens to the youngsters that slip through the net and they decide not to go on any courses or anything?
Okay. So in terms of any groups of young people and whether they're being identified early enough, there are 2 elements to that. So the early identification toolkit tracks quite a wide range of information about each individual learner. So that will include some of their vulnerability factors, as we call them, and it will do that in an intersectional way. So it will look at whether a young person may be entitled to free school meals. It will look at whether a young person may have an additional learning need, whether somebody might be a young carer, whether they may have low attendance, whether they may have had some exclusions or a managed move. I could go on, it's a long list. And we also look at young people who've got more than one of those criteria, as we know that will increase your risk of becoming NEET. What we've done strategically in the last 2 years, we've looked at the data that comes out of our high schools for years 11, 12 and 13 and year 10, and we've initiated an early intervention project So a good example is one of the high schools in our city. We noted that they had an increased rate of NEETs compared with other schools, for example. So we've developed a project which has been implemented in the primary schools that feed that secondary school. So we've met with the head teachers of all of the primary schools in that cluster, and we've developed an early identification toolkit model for use in year 5 and 6, because very often the young people that you referred to as slipping through the net, those young people that reach no destination and are NEET, you can often see the indicating factors quite early on in their school career. Yeah. So at a year 5 and 6 level, so that's the last 2 year groups of primary school, we've identified 30 pupils within each of those primary schools to receive an additional intervention project. So that's, if you like, it's a mentoring project disguised as a practical woodworking project done outdoors in the school's grounds. So there are entry criteria, exit criteria, so we can measure whether that intervention, working alongside a mentor on those very much hands-on lessons which are outdoors and therefore quite engaging for young people, whether that's improving their attendance, improving their engagement, their well-being and mental health. So we are actively working to start intervening with young people as young as possible, and we'll track that cohort as they now move into Key Stage 3 and transition into secondary school. And then for young people that slip through the net, as I've mentioned, young people that go into Tier 1 or Tier 2 in the Careers Wales model. So that might be that either they're unknown to Careers Wales, so Careers Wales have not been able to identify for certain what their outcome has been, or they are aged 16 to 17, but they are, for whatever reason, they're not ready or not available for a destination. So that could include young people who might be known to the Youth Justice Service, for example, or young people whose mental health or physical health is significantly difficult, so they're not ready to enter something after school. They will continue having that connection with a careers advisor who will continue to offer the interventions that we've described, but through the Careers Wales route.
Okay. That's great, thank you.
Councillor Watkins, I've got my chat working now, so you know, so there we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's referenced the Year 11 listing on NEETs, the 20th listing to the 5th. What were the numbers of pupils that we're talking about that got us to the 20th, and what are the numbers to the 5th? And the other one was, how do the other local authorities affect our listing because of the numbers and percentages which they have? Okay, it's nice to see going up to 5th, but that could be 5 or 6 pupils. We don't know. So I'm interested in the numbers in regards to what made us go down to 20th and what made us then return back to the 5th. And how do other local authority numbers affect our listing in the list?
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. I will be honest, I don't have pupil numbers available to hand at the moment, but I can certainly provide those for you. If I could refer you to section 1.9 of the report, the trends in NEETs data over time, you'll notice that this year, when we were 5th position in Wales, 1.5% of our Year 11 learners were identified as being NEET in October 2025, whereas the previous year, the 2023-24 cohort, when we were placed 20th, we had 3.2% of young people being NEET. So it's a small percentage point shift that can make a significant difference to our ranking, if you like, compared with other local authorities in Wales. Additionally, the national average will change every year. So you'll notice over the past 5 years, the Wales average for Year 11 has been 1.6, 2.1, 2.0, 2.4% last year when our position was 20th, and back to 2.1% this year. So we note that NEETs at Year 11 in the whole of Wales increased last year, but it increased more significantly for us in Newport. What you might notice in the Appendix A tables that are included in this report is that other local authorities have experienced that sudden change to a much more negative position, but this year. So you'll notice in year 11, the local authorities that are very near the bottom of the rankings of local authorities in Wales this year were much higher up last year. So I think the challenges that we've described in terms of a growing population, reduced funding for lower entry qualifications and training provider places, more stringent entry requirements for joining courses at Coleg Gwent than we've seen in the past, those effects are being felt in our neighbouring local authorities, but a year later.
Okay, one further question, Chair, and that is, I'm involved with the Aspire group in my constituency. How are they contacted and brought into line with the secondary schools to prevent the NEETs going from there? Because possibly they could be a rather higher percentage in there rather than it, because the organisation is involved in a number of wards within Newport now, and I'm wondering whether we actually deal with them.
Yes.
So, can I just mention, Councillor Watkins, that because Aspire is not separate to schools, those children are registered on school registers, if you like. They're not separate. So when Becky talks about the toolkit, for instance, in tracking those pupils, all Aspire pupils are part of the school registers. There's nothing separate about them, for instance.
Right.
The other bit
Okay.
so that's really good, and that's what we like about the Aspire programme, that it supports pupils who've been previously disengaged and gets them back engaged, secures destination. Aspire has got an excellent track history of successfully continuing to secure destinations, and they're really strong at the transitional element in making sure that they're looking after their learners as they exit. So
was they included into the numbers? That's what I was considering.
absolutely, but you know, what a great example of securing destinations for pupils that may have been previously vulnerable.
Okay, thank you, Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I think Councillor Cleverly was before me. I'm not sure when Sam read out the list.
Well, there's
I think
not on.
I think Councillor Cleverly's accidentally put her hand up on a different one, but it is there,
Yeah.
Chair.
If you go, carry on, and we'll bring it in after this. Carry on, Bev.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Got a couple of observations and just one or two questions for you. I mean, it was very even though it was short, it was a very complex report. I would like to see in future, I enjoyed reading about Jay and how good it is when all partners come together, because I think that's something that we do need to recognise, is the fact that not all children are academic. And that a lot of children are more hands-on. So, and it, you know, the fact that he's gone on so well is really really brilliant. One thing I was going to ask, the one partner that you haven't included is youth justice, and I was thinking, reading through the report and the partners, you know, no matter how we try to avoid it, children at sort of 13, 14 can get into a lot of trouble. Yeah. And so I think it would be important as well if we involved youth justice.
Councillor Davis, just to give you some reassurance, we do. It might not, although it doesn't appear on that multi-agency group, we work with youth justice in a really pupil by pupil way. So we got a key officer, well, two actually. We've got Sarah Todd, who does the contextual work with schools, and also Katie Diamond, who's working with all types of behaviour type support. And she will be able to work with youth justice around each individual pupil, this working either to prevent them entering the criminal youth justice system or they're part of it. And it's likely because they've got to receive education as part of their package, that's their entitlement, of course. they're also likely to be part of our secondary schools or our pupil referral unit. So it's just to give you that reassurance that they tracked through those two mechanisms. So we're not leaving any stone unturned, and it's likely that those officers are having individual meetings about individual pupils, because we're not talking about lots and lots of pupils. And each one of those pupils might be highly complex or have high vulnerabilities, and so there's lots of things to address. So we didn't see it necessary for Youth Justice to come into that multi-agency arena in the Youth Support Board, for instance, because their time is better spent with individual pupils dealing with individual officers. Does that help reassure you?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, that is absolutely great. Another thing that I wanted to mention as well was earlier on you touched on it with Councillor Jenkins about the Year 6 pilot. Is there any, going forward, is there any chance of that being developed in other secondary schools in Newport?
Certainly, Councillor Davis. So we decided to take a pilot approach because we wanted to be able to measure the impact of that work and ensure that it was achieving the outcomes that we wanted it to achieve. We've funded that project. We've delivered that intervention in partnership with a charity in Newport, which we funded through an additional grant that comes straight into education. So we have requirements to report to Welsh Government on what we spend that grant money on and whether it has that impact. Anecdotally, we can say it's having impact, but now that we've got our 5th school in a cluster coming on board, we'll have a broader range of data to be able to analyse and evidence that it is value for money, if you like, that it does have an impact. And that's the outcome we're expecting to see when we collate all of our data now at the end of this summer term. And then, as long as grant funding levels continue as they are, then yes, we would certainly like to roll that out more broadly across the city.
That's brilliant, because I mean, I think we do tend to lose a lot of children, but in that transition between
exactly.
primary and secondary. So anything that we can do to prevent that happening is absolutely brilliant. Just got one more thing, and it's not a question. I mean, the great improvement we've got on the left and unknown. That is great, going from 3.66 to 1.39, so brilliant, well done on that. And the fact that the report concludes that Newport's improvement is largely driven by early intervention, which we all know that is a significant thing. Robust tracking and good multi-agency partnership increased participation, down to up to 97.1%. And I have actually wrote after I put that, well done, because I think that is very significant, and it is nice. I'd like to see more J's coming up in the report, because it's nice to see what has been achieved. And you know, our children are very important, and it would be sad to see somebody fall through the cracks when we don't need to. So yeah, brilliant report. Thank you for your answers, and well done. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your feedback, Councillor Davis. And we hoped that the case study would bring the work to life for members of the committee, because underneath these figures are our young people and their real life experiences. So thank you for your feedback. It's very much appreciated.
That's okay. You're welcome. Thank you, Chair.
We're going to go to Councillor Cleverly.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning.
Right, I don't know what I can say now, because most of my questions have been answered. I'm a retired youth and community worker, so I worked with NEET for over 20 years. I also done a transition project, and we used Gwent Outdoor Centres, where we took, I think it was Ringland School and St Julian's, year 5 and 6, where we targeted them. So I really welcome this project coming back again. That's absolutely excellent. But one of my questions was a bit on the recruitment of young people, which I think you've answered in the areas that you target, and also about young people falling through the net, which Councillor Jenkins mentioned. And I think you've answered all them completely. So because I am concerned about young people falling through the net after working with them over the years, you know, especially in the area I live. in the summer, I see lots of them hanging about, you know, in areas around the area I live. So I appreciate they're being targeted.
Thank you, Councillor Cleverly. And just to add there, that summer holiday provision is another area that we've developed more strongly this year than before. So we've worked with 3 key training providers to offer provision for young people throughout the summer. It will be those young people at risk of becoming NEET, and it will be a twofold rationale. So firstly, it's to keep them engaged. So once they leave school, they lose that contact with those trusted members of staff that they lean on for support. So it's to keep them engaged with mentoring and training providers, but it's also giving them some of those basic skills and qualifications so that when they do transfer to a training provider or a college placement, they've got the best chance of sustaining that destination over time. So it might offer them over the summer holiday program, they might take a food hygiene qualification or the card qualification that you need to take a construction course. That's the one, exactly.
I used to do all that with the young people, you know, because the more qualifications they gain, because they don't do it in the schools because they're not interested, basically. And so we used to do those sort of qualifications to make sure they had some sort of access when they did leave to get, you know, jobs and wherever. And we used to take them to the job fairs and all. But I also need to speak about the Aspire project. I met with Carl Reid before it started again last year in Betty's community, and of course I knew some of the youth workers that was working with him, and it's been absolutely brilliant since they've restarted, because before they did have problems working up there in the local community, but we haven't had any problems whatsoever, and you know, it's a joy to have them back, and it's great to see the young people aspire and achieve their outcomes. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. I couldn't get my camera on then. Before I ask my question, I just want to endorse really what Councillor Davies was saying earlier on. I know as a scrutiny committee, obviously our job is to scrutinise these reports and try and push for improvements as far as we can. And sometimes we can sound quite critical, and it's easy sometimes to forget to actually say well done to people. So it is important. There's some really good stuff in this report, and you know, the case study at the end, you know, with the pseudonym J, you know, it's inspiring. It really is inspiring. So you know, it's important that we say well done sometimes. So yeah, I'll endorse everything that Councillor Davis said there. She mentioned the case study. That's really why I put my hand up, to be honest, because as I say, that one was really inspiring to read. But the one thing I did notice was that it obviously involved the allocation of a number of various caseworkers to work alongside Jay. There was a youth engagement, a progression framework officer, a careers advisor, a one-to-one mentor. And I'm not criticising this in any shape or form. I think it's fantastic. I'm assuming all those officers would have involved multiple partner organisations. So I'm just wondering how many of each of those sorts of officers do we have access to as a council, and how manageable are their workloads, because I presume they all work with multiple individuals. So how much time are they able to give to each individual, and what's the budget implications of using so many organisations and officers for each individual case? As I say, I hope that doesn't sound critical, because I think it's fantastic what they do. I just want to try and get an overall picture.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. So from our perspective in education, as I mentioned, the youth support grant comes from Welsh Government into the prevention and inclusions team, and they delegate a portion of that to support the employment of the education progression coordinator, often called the the YEP coordinator.
Yeah.
So that's one full-time officer who sits in my team in education, but we work very closely in partnership with the youth service in terms of his role and his outcomes. So he is responsible for tracking the destinations of every young person in year 11, 12 and 13. So he does have a significantly sized caseload. Every school has one dedicated careers officer from Careers Wales. But each careers advisor will work across more than one school. So, for example, many of our secondary schools will have their careers advisor 1 day a week or perhaps 1.5 days a week. And they're tasked with meeting every single pupil in year 11 during the course of year 11, as well as being able to advise year 12s and year 13s on a needs basis. And then you might be aware that the youth service model is not allocated to schools. So I wouldn't be able to tell you there's a certain number of youth workers for each school. They have a community hub model. So they work out of their youth centres across the community. But they are always able to support us when needed. So when we have our half-termly allocation meetings, our wellbeing allocation meetings, all services are represented, and we'll sit down with each school and we'll talk about each individual pupil, and we'll say, this young person needs to be referred to the youth service and they will allocate a youth worker to support them. This young person needs an additional one-to-one mentoring session with their careers advisor and they will schedule that. So we are not blessed with huge resources in terms of numbers of officers, which is why partnership working and making sure that we work as efficiently as we can, because we communicate and identify pupils very early, is the absolute key.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. Thanks, Peggy. As you say, partnership working, it is absolutely the key to this, isn't it? So I suppose really the only follow-up question to that is, do you think things could be improved in terms of either numbers or budgets or allocations? Or, how do you feel things are?
I think we're working very effectively with the resources that we have, and we would be keen to see those protected and safeguarded. So we would be concerned if there were any significant reduction in funding. And it is, it is a team effort across education. So where I say we've got one education progression coordinator, there are a number of other officers, myself included, that support the work of that officer. And if there are any increased resources available, we will never say no.
Can I just add there as well that the biggest risk in all of this is linked to the reduction in funding to training providers. So again, that is the most vulnerable group of pupils that don't necessarily have the option of taking a vocational or academic pathway. They need the vocational pathway. Also, that is a really important part of our economy, isn't it? Now, a future workforce, that we've got skilled builders and goes on to all those different crafts and professions. The 20% reduction has had a significant impact. Okay, there, and young people might take longer within those training provider places because of experiences in COVID, mental health issues, etc. Those places are precious and they create the biggest risk to the system. So I'm hoping that we're not going to see any further cuts, although they are pending and that is apparent, but this is going to cause issues right across Wales. And there is nothing that can replicate those places.
Yeah, I'm fully in agreement with you there. Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Maggie. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, there's no other hands up that I can see. Oh, hang on. No other hands up I can see. We'll continue through. I mean, I'm not quite sure what part of the report we got up to now. It's been such a fascinating set of questions. I congratulate everybody on asking them. Is there any other questions on this report rather than continuing with it?
Yeah, can I come in on one? Obviously from experience of doing youth work, but in a slightly different way with like St John Ambulance and the tertiary sector, I'm just wondering, is there scope and work that can be done in partnership? Because it's looking at hands-on careers like healthcare, things like that there, that young people wouldn't obviously have, through other means. So it's just whether or not there is scope of that within Scouts for the, adventure activity, just stuff like that, outside the normal remit, because they have, you know, good facility resources and stuff that could be utilised as well. Not that I'm going to say to rush like hundreds of people through, because we wouldn't be able to have the capacity, but it would be just another route that maybe we can work with some young people. And I say that from the tertiary side. Is there any scope for that? Thank you.
I would suggest that that's better placed within youth services to make those third sector links, and that we wouldn't invite specific organisations to join the youth service support board, because youth service would engage with those third sectors. Yeah, but I think you make a very good point, Councillor Marshall. Thank you.
Any other comments? There are no other comments on the report. So we move. Can I thank you, Sarah, for presenting this, and to Becky for taking the off-the-cuff questions that the committee has fired at you, and for your ability and eloquent way that you've answered everyone this morning. So thank you for that. And also can I endorse the positive comments that everybody else has made, because I do think that that we want you to take away that the committee supports, but also that we are here to scrutinise and to ensure the best possible outcomes, such as yourself are, for pupils right throughout Newport. As I mentioned to Sarah, if she could stay behind after, that would be very grateful. I'm going to pass over down to you, Sam.
Yeah, no problem. If it's all right, Chair, I'll just really quickly run through what I've captured for our outcomes.
Yes.
It was Councillor Watkins' request for numbers of the pupils that secure our positioning, so I do have that noted. And aside from that, I've just made a note that committee are really pleased with the improvement and content with the report, unless there's anything anyone wants to add.
I think committee were also mindful and concerned about any further cuts, either to the private sector or to our own sector here, because that would have a negative impact on outcomes. And I think that's well worth just noting, although some of those impacts are outside our control, just so committee has made that point, and they made it quite strongly, and it's been identified by officers that we really can't keep cutting the services, because it's there. So if we can just add something in there, Sam, for that. Anything else? Do you?
Chair, I would agree with what you just said, but I would also like to add on and complement that with the entry requirements, which is important as well, because that has an effect, especially when we're talking about the vocational courses that these young people would normally go on and want to go on. Obviously, it's a concern if they do raise the requirements.
Absolutely, thank you, Steve. Anything else that we could? Okay, that's that. So I think we've got the date of the next meeting, Sam. Got my papers.
Yeah, that's okay. If you want, I'll just run through my reports and my section really quickly.
Yeah.
That's okay, don't worry. That's fine. Just to note, Chair, very quickly, that I've received apologies from Councillor Townsend as well. So I'll make sure that they're noted in our minutes. Yes. Okay. A couple of very quick updates from me. So, Chair, I know you were away, but we did have a Scrutiny Chairs meeting where we looked at methods of scrutiny. We're following our Audit Wales review. One of the areas they identified for us to improve was, how do we diversify our methods of scrutiny? How do we engage more widely? So after this meeting, I'll make sure that committee have a copy of that table that we've put together in collaboration with the partnerships team. Welcome any suggestions. So I'll get that out, and if you could let me know, that'd be great. The other update I have is that we've tweaked our recommendations table to be colour-coded, so it's just a little bit easier at a glance to understand our position. And on that note, the red action is actually green now. We've had the response, but it came in after I published, so that's all up to date. Same with the outcomes, we're all up to date, clean slate for the next year, which is quite nice. And then the forward work programme, I know committee have seen already. The only change since I circulated it in March is that we've got an additional meeting and an additional item, which is the youth service strategy. But if anyone has any questions or wants to amend anything or raise anything, quite happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. Does anybody have any? Councillor Watkins?
Oh, I think you're on mute, Councillor.
Microphone, turn them on. You mentioned about colour coding, Sam. Can we have a short 3-liner after the colour coding where something has changed from red to green, the reasons why that has happened, or vice versa, from green to red? Vice versa.
So there is a key included. The colour coding only means what position that action is at. So if it's green, it's complete. If it's gone from a red to a green, that just means that the action's gone from being outstanding to being completed, if that makes sense. It's not necessarily a performance measurement.
It's only the action being completed, not the standing where it is.
Yeah, 100%. There is an amber action just for those that are ongoing, so the longer term ones. It's just to make it a bit easier to see at a glance and help committee focus where they need to focus.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Sam. Thank you,
No
Chair.
problem.
Okay. There's no more questions there now. You've dealt with the forward work programme. We've dealt with our business. We're going to now conclude. I thank you all for coming this morning and for all your participation as well. So we're going to end